In this lesson, we will walk through some examples of procedural texturing on a shoe midsole. So I have this sole imported into my notebook, and I have the midsole saved as an implicit body, and I've also created this sidewall. So using the sides of our CAD, I use this custom block implicit body from CAD Faces that just thickens this inwards 1 millimeter. So if you're unfamiliar with custom blocks, I recommend looking at our Intro to Automation course on how to import, export custom blocks like the ones we have in this notebook. But I have my sidewall, and this is what I'm going to add my procedural texturing to. And I have a lot of different types of textures that I could play around with. So I'll click on this first one and type S. Let's change the plane from normal to be 0, 1, 0. And what we'll see is I'll have this herringbone-like texture. If I use this one, if I type S, we can see I have this polka dot texture, angular texture, this cell-like design, something like leather, something similar to a marble, and wood. So I'll play around with all of these and see what this looks like to create this procedural texturing on this sidewall. I'll put my mouse on that texturing sidewall, so I'll click on that. And just as we had done in our adding roughness follow along, we're going to use an offset body to add this type of texture. So for the body, we'll use our sidewall. And for the distance, we'll start with just our texture swap. So we'll use this variable texture swap, and we can just input different textures and quickly change which one we're using. And we'll start off by just putting this in. So unlike the adding roughness follow along, we did not have to multiply by 1 millimeter to get these units. And that's because these are custom blocks. They already have that step put in. But a lot of these are using either our fields or one of our noises, such as simplex noise ready or cellular noise ready for anything like that leather, that cells type of texture. And now you can see I have this pattern. We're using the angular field, so we get something like this. Now, even though we don't need to multiply or divide by units, we might want to still use that multiply block before putting our texture swap right in. And the reason for that is maybe you still want to have that varying thickness for that texture. So for instance, right at that inside, maybe I want it to be nice and smooth, and on the outside, that's where I want that texture to be. So I'll delete this texture swap and instead add a multiply block, and we'll multiply our texture swap by a ramp to get that varying thickness. And if you are unfamiliar with ramp block, I recommend viewing our Intro to Fields course, specifically the lesson on ramps, which is linked below this video. But I'll type in a ramp block. And for our scalar field, this time we're going to use our midsole. So our midsole, remember, is that edge of the midsole is right at the edge of our sidewall. And what we want to define is what happens at the inner side of that sidewall. So I'm going to have as my in min will still be 0, so right at that surface of the midsole. And then our in max, we have thickened this sidewall by 1 millimeter, so it's 1 millimeter into our midsole. So my texture fall off, where we're going to end that design, that texture, is going to be 1 millimeter. But you can see this is negative 1 millimeter because instead of going out of our part, which would be positive 1, we are going into that midsole, and so it is negative 1. At the surface I want to have my maximum texture depth, which is going to be 1, and our outmax is 0. Again, note that this texture depth, this outmin and outmax, is unitless. So we don't need to add millimeters. Our texture already has that millimeter. And if we added millimeters here, then it would again be the wrong units because it would be in millimeters squared. And I'll choose geometric continuity. So we can see it runs. If I want to see the field version of this, turn off that offset body, sidewall, and the midsole, and just type, let's type F for the ramp. I can put my values and see it's 1, and then it goes to 0. So very quickly we can see that change. If we click on our multiply block, we can see that when we are past that 1 millimeter from that surface of the midsole, we are no longer going to have that texture. And if I look at my offset body, it shows me that same result. So I'm viewing this in medium resolution, but if I click on this offset body, go to view, and choose precise render, or type Control H, we can see I'm going to have that smooth surface inside at 1 millimeter of our sidewall, and we're only going to have that offset body as we go closer to that surface. So I'll right click, make this a variable, and label this textured sidewall. And we can look at this with our midsole, and that's the design that we get. So now is the time to see what these other textures look like. So I could put in my polka dot texture and see what that looks like. We can do the herringbone, the cells texture, or something like that, which is pretty neat. Leather. You can kind of see it is very thin. And something to note with this too is if I look at this, I can control this cell depth and the frequency. So we could make this, we could change this pattern as well too. You're not set on just this exact design for any of these. We can change that cell size. We have a lot to change for that marble if we want. And you can also always go into that custom block and change it as well too. I have what the marble would look like, and then our wood. So our wood is also a good example of how we can change things. So what this does is it takes our axis, which you're using as a cylinder. We can control that frequency and the organicness of the field. So just by moving my axis, so I'll move that starting point to there, we are going to get a slightly different design for this wood-like texture. So a lot of ways you can change things. These are just some starting textures, and you can also make your own.